seat fancy, so if people want to sort of sit here and then I feel even more claustrophobic, that's great. Come on, come out. Not that scary. That sort of film, really fine.
While I film.
Right, this is really, that is really freaking me out. I had to do one of these for the NUS, and that was really unsettling because now I'm in every university union on their training, which is interesting. So, hi, I'm Jacob. I work for Crown Cellars at Wine and Spirits Division of Carlsberg. We are doing your wine. Your wine list is fantastic. That is the first thing that I will say. That's not just me saying it, that is a genuine thing. We spent a lot of time trying to get the wines right, trying to make them more exciting than anywhere else, trying to give people something a bit different, and giving people the best wines we possibly could for a price. The list of wines that you've got wouldn't look out of place in any city centre in the country, including London, for what you've got. It is special. I will go into more detail, not today, on specific wines so that you know them. Because your wines, a lot of them are very different, people will ask you questions about them, so you'll have to know them. So my job is to make sure that you all have enough knowledge so that when people go, what the fuck's that wine? You can go, it's this, it's from here, it's delightful.
Stop swearing, please.
Yeah, apologies, I have a potty mouth. So, a lot of this training is sort of been requested by Chris Gavin then to try and make sure that you have a little bit of better understanding of wine generally. Some of you will know some of these things, some of you won't. Apologies, I never try and make my training sessions patronising. I'm conscious that some of it might be, but bear with me, and hopefully you'll all go away from this having learned something generally about wine so that you can learn more specifics as you go along. Is that all right? Mm-hmm. So, bear in mind that some of this stuff is absolutely fascinating to someone like me who works in wine, who drinks a lot of wine, who is a bit of a geek about wine. So if you don't feel the same, nod and smile and just patronise me a little bit back, because it'll make me feel better about my life. So I'll give you a little bit of background about us as a company, so that if people ask about your wine supplier, which they may or may not do, then you can let them know that we're actually good and we know what we're doing. First thing I say is if people ask about your wine supplier, which some people will because there are different and interesting wines. Not that I think Carlsberg is a negative thing in many senses, but people in the UK don't understand that Carlsberg are an enormous global company. They see it as a green pint of standard lager. So to say Carlsberg supply wines, people go, that's a bit weird. Crown Cellars is the wines and spirits division of Carlsberg. So if you say your wine supplier is Crown Cellars, they will then maybe potentially Google it on their phones while they're there, because people don't like talking to each other, they like looking on their phones. So Crown Cellars is your wine supplier. They'll be able to find out all the information about us online and see lots of pictures of me, and hopefully no videos. So Carlsberg have been doing wine for over 20 years. We do know what we're doing as a business. We have over 500 wines, probably about 600 now. So when it comes to choice, when it comes to quality, you can be very confident that you've got somebody that knows what they're doing, hopefully. And a lot of the wines that we do are either exclusive to us as a business or exclusive to the on-trade. So there will be very, very few wines on your list, other than potentially a couple of the top-end ones, that will be available outside of the on-trade. And certainly I wouldn't expect people to necessarily know where they could find them, even though they might know the producers. From an expertise point of view, just so that you're reassured that A, I know what I'm talking about, and B, we know what we're talking about as a business, we have a number of people in the business that are very well qualified on wine. I am one of them, hopefully. I am, yeah, I'm brilliant. And we do have wine specialists. The two things that I always think are really important that reassure people are our consultant for our wine range every year is a guy called Jonathan Pedley. He looks like that. Very few of you will be able to see that picture. He looks like some sort of mad scientist. He worked with Keith Floyd. He's a reasonably well-known TV personality. He's incredibly well-known globally in the wine world. He's one of 340 masters of wine in the world, so he knows his stuff. I nearly swore again. And he puts his name to our wine range. So for him to do that takes some confidence in the fact that all our wines are good, but the wines that you've chosen are specifically fantastic. We also have a wine buyer who has been in place for 10 years, which is really important because it means that those relationships that we have with wineries mean that A, we get a better price, and B, in 6 months' time, we're not going to be saying to you, sorry, that wine's being delisted, that wine's being delisted, that wine's being delisted, we've fallen out with the supplier. Generally, we have good relationships with our suppliers, despite the fact that Carlsberg batter them for price. And then we have local regional wines and spirits guys like me. I put a picture of one of my colleagues who's now my boss there, just to show you how smug some people look that work within our business. You may or may not meet him at some point, don't laugh. So, now the wine bit. You will probably struggle to see this, so I'll have to tell you about it rather than just saying look at the screen and read it. I find this sort of stuff incredibly interesting. I'm aware that you may or may not, but humour me on it because it genuinely is quite important. This table spreadsheet shows what wines have sold, well, what countries of wine have sold in the UK purely in the on-trade over the last 12 months. Some, or hopefully most of you, drink wine to a greater or lesser extent. If you don't start, it's brilliant. It keeps me in a job, and it is a whole new world to explore. What some people have got really hung up on in the UK, especially over the last sort of 5-6 years, is that French wine is, it's really difficult for me not to swear, I'm having to consciously not. French wine isn't as good as it used to be, and it doesn't sell as much as it used to. And that has mainly been stoked by my generation and the generation around that have not necessarily grown up with French wine. Data shows, and data is data, so it's correct, that French wine is still the most popular in the UK, in the on-trade. I'm always slightly taken aback by that. Some of that is driven by London, because within that you've got champagne, you've got the top-end French stuff, that if you go down to City of London is all they drink. Up north, we can't afford champagne and Chablis every day. It would be lovely, but we can't, so we don't. But that does skew it slightly. But the interesting thing there again for me is that French wine is in growth, so it is growing, and some of the countries that you would expect potentially to be in slight increase were wines that you may or may not drink. Don't take this the wrong way, I'm not being sexist, but you've got quite a lot of women in the room. Sweet rosé tends to be a go-to wine for a lot of people. California wine is in decline. Less people are drinking sweet rosé. That's largely due to things like fruit ciders. The market is crossover between those two rather than different wines a lot of the time. So if you do drink sweet rosé, please go from sweet rosé to other wines rather than to fruit ciders, because otherwise I won't have a job. Also things like Australian wine that have traditionally over the last few years been very strong are now in decline as well. The key ones I guess to focus on, what this does show is when people say, I have the easiest job in the world, everyone drinks more wine. It's not true. Wine overall is in decline in the on-trade, so my job is really, really difficult. New Zealand wine is in massive growth. That's driven by Sauvignon Blanc. Some of you may or may not drink New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. It is a go-to mid-range wine for a lot of people now. So you will inevitably sell a lot of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. Take some pride and take some genuine knowledge that you have one of the best New Zealand Sauvignons available at the moment. But the value change is also really interesting. Probably more to Linda than some of you guys, but there's a reason, just so you can see there's reasons why there's different wines on your wine list. French wine is selling for more money, Spanish wine is selling for more money, Italian wine is selling for more money, and New Zealand wine is selling for a lot more money. So these are the things that you need to be thinking about. For someone like me, really important in putting a wine list together that will A, hopefully be popular with customers, and B, make sure that the bar does really well, then we can retire retire, you can all have jobs. It keeps everybody happy. So this one's even more busy, so I won't dwell on it for too long, I promise. But probably the key things to pull out of this are A, wine is an incredibly important category in the trade. It's the third most important in volume terms, and bear in mind that a glass of wine is a lot less than a pint of beer in volume terms, but also it sells for more money and it is increasingly selling for more money. So for the on-trade and for people to get things right, they need to be getting wine right. The key one, and which you will inevitably all probably see anyway, but we'll see a lot more at Vine, hopefully when it opens, is sparkling wine. It's in the biggest growth of any category in the trade, and it's also in the biggest in terms of price per litre growth. So you have a phenomenal, Linda's done a really brave thing, stupid thing, fantastic thing in putting the best Prosecco that we possibly can as your Prosecco. You also have a really good Cava on there, and you've got lots of choice. You will sell a lot of fizz. People now drink Prosecco especially as an everyday treat, whereas champagne is still seen as, oh, that's a luxury item, we can't necessarily buy champagne. They will at your place, I promise. Prosecco will sell, so that's why it's so important. This one is the last detail of boring statistics that are really interesting to me and not so to you, but it shows the split of what people drink when they're out. I think again this is quite interesting, hopefully you will a little bit. The three main things to think about generally: white wine sold everywhere, rosé is generally sold as a drink, people don't necessarily very often drink it with food, and red wine is almost exclusively sold with food. You will see that from when you go out, you will see that from people's habits. Generally, if I'm out, will I have a glass of red wine on its own? Not very often. If I want to look particularly sophisticated, maybe, but I don't do that very often. Will I have a bottle of red with my food? It depends on what I'm eating, yes. But that shows that white wine is still much more significant in percentage terms than any other category. And rosé is much smaller than people think.
That is surprising with rosé, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and that's, you know, especially when you've got food in the mix. That changes depending on the category of bar. So if you're wet-led, somewhere where people go drinking, rosé will be a much bigger split. But that includes everything in the on-trade. So all the restaurants are in there, all different types of places are in there. So rosé is, and you'll see it by the sales, and people always go, oh no, we're doing, you know, busy places, we're doing 60 bottles of rosé a week. I'm like, okay, that's brilliant, but you're also doing probably 60 bottles of Sauvignon Blanc, 60 bottles of Pinot Grigio, 30 bottles of Chardonnay. So because rosé generally people have one that sells really well, maybe two, that looks like a lot more. But if you've got 3 or 4 white wines, 3 or 4 red wines that are selling the same, as a percentage of your sales, it's not really that big. Some interesting facts. These are really interesting. Some of these I've already gone over because I'm starting to talk about stuff ahead of myself, which I do. White wine is dominant. It's over 50% of wine value. Wet-led outlets, rosé outsells red. I would be incredibly surprised if that's going to be the case where you are, because A, you're doing quite a lot of charcuterie, meats, cheeses. People will inevitably be drinking red more than they would if it was just wet-led. Red wine sells as food, so in traditional restaurants it's about 40% of sales. These are probably the interesting things, the important things for you to know, because these will be the grapes that people are asking for a glass of quite often. So in red wine terms, Merlot, Shiraz and Cab Sauv is about 40% of all the red wine sold in the UK on-trade. You will look at your list and go, well, why the fuck have we got all these? Why on earth have we got all these other wines? And that is because we're trying to give people something different and try and take people out of their comfort zone a little bit and experience new things. Much in the way as a lot of the meats and cheeses people might not have tried, you want to give people new wines to go with it. White wine wise, it's an even bigger percentage. It's split between 3 grapes. So Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Grigio is about 75%.
Wow. 75%?
Yeah, it's frightening.
God.
People in the UK, probably more than anywhere in the world, have a really annoying phrase, which is, I stick to what I know, or I know what I like. It's like, well, yeah, you probably do. But if you don't try something for the first time, you don't know if you're going to like that, do you? So your job is largely going to be to get people to try things for the first time. And there will be a big element of that. That will be largely down to you. Hopefully I'll be able to have some sort of influence in that. But the way you are, the way you carry yourselves, the way you engage with customers will be the key thing to drive that. You know, if you're smiling, if you've tasted all the wines, if you can confidently say to people, try this, it's brilliant, they will go with you. They really will. I'll try and make that easier for you, I promise. So, in the UK, in the on-trade, people generally, and this goes against previous slides, you might think that people prefer New World to Old World. Much as France is still the most dominant country, if you put all the New World countries together, they outsell the Old World. Your list, you will see, hopefully, has a balance of that, so there are wines from all over. So people have choice. It's important to have variety and important to have balance.
Do you understand what it means by old world and new world?
Okay. Old World, effectively, is Europe. And for ease, and it is generally the case in how people categorise. So it's Europe, so it's Italy, Spain, France. It's Old World, because they are perceived to be the oldest wine producing countries. New World, they are, I mean, they've all produced wine for over 2,000 years, so they generally are the oldest wine producing countries. Where it gets slightly confused sometimes is a country like South Africa is apparently where it has been producing wine since sort of 16th century, when the French went there. Somewhere like Lebanon, which is counted as New World, has been producing wine for over 2,000 years. So there's a little bit of debate about what countries should be, but for ease, Old World, Italy, Spain, France, New World, everywhere else. The main reason why, especially from my generation, have been drinking more New World wines, and you will probably all drink more New World wines than what you will anything else, apart from Italian Pinot Grigio potentially, is because the labelling is so much easier to understand in New World, and that's how they created such dominant marketplace in the UK. Because if you've got an Australian Shiraz, on the bottle it will say Australian and Shiraz. That makes it quite easy for the average UK consumer to know what's in that bottle. Whereas if you get a bottle of French wine, it might say Chateauneuf du Pape on it, it might say Bordeaux on it, it might say Sancerre or Chablis on it. Now people might know that they're names, they might think that they're grapes, they might think that they're regions, but they haven't largely, unless you've got a reasonable understanding in wine, which all of you will have soon, and you'll be able to lecture people like me. But it means that people aren't so familiar and comfortable with ordering those wines. If you know that it's a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, you've got confidence in that. I know what that is, I've got an idea what it tastes like, I certainly know that within that price point, that's what I'm comfortable with. Most European wines, and it is most rather than many still, don't use varietal labelling, and that's what I've been talking about. So people won't, they're moving towards it, so you have got some more New World wines, and Italy is probably the biggest country that's been able to exploit it, in that they generally have put grapes on their wines, and Pinot Grigio has been the biggest success story in the wine trade in the UK in the last 10 years, for a number of reasons, but that is definitely one of them. So, what is wine? I always have to put this slide in, and this is the one that is most patronising, but I was told by my boss to say, okay, you can all answer this question, what is wine? So I'll open this to the floor. Anybody?
Or grapes.
Yeah. It has.
It's fermented grapes.
Pretty close. Pretty close, to be fair. Dictionary definition wise, wine is an alcoholic beverage obtained from fermentation in the juice of freshly gathered grapes. Fermentation taking place in the district of origin according to traditional practice. The district of origin thing and fermentation taking place there is really quite important. So for a wine to be called New Zealand wine, the fermentation has to have taken place in New Zealand. So you can't buy grapes from New Zealand, import the grapes to the UK, make wine and call it New Zealand wine. So that is quite important. You can bottle that wine, so people, and a lot of wines now are bulked in tankers from New Zealand, Australia, South Africa to the UK, bottled here because it's cheaper, but the wine itself and the fermentation has to take place in that country. So you know, if that wine says it's from there, it was made there. This is quite an important one because you will inevitably get, with the type of bar that you are going to be, you will get a variety of people, from people who have lots of money, people who want to pretend they have lots of money, people who know something about wine, people who pretend they know lots about wine. You will get a massive cross-section of people within the bar who will be challenging to greater or lesser extents. One of the questions you will get asked is inevitably, why haven't you got this wine? And that will be, it could be anything. There are now over 500,000 wines available in the world commercially. And that's not just like Jean-Claude in about south of France making his own wine. This is commercial wines. There's over 500,000. So if you tell people, well, we'd love to have that on for you, but they're over 500,000, so we can't have them all, generally they'll be back in the box and you can leave it alone. This again is quite interesting. Hopefully this will give you a background and a better knowledge of what wine is and why it is what it is. Wine is produced generally in two bands in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. It's gradually changing because global warming is happening, so those regions are changing. But around the tropics in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, so from the tropics above in both, is where you get wine. So in those bands you will see in the northern hemisphere you've got California, so those people over there, I'll just point to bits on the screen, you can trust me that that's where it is on the map. You've got California over there, on the east coast of America you've got Washington and those sort of places. You've got all the European wine producing countries, so Italy, France and Spain are in there, Germany, down into Southeast Europe, so they do make a lot of wine in countries like Slovenia and all those sort of places, even though it's not exported. Also North Africa, if you go to Morocco, they produce their own wines. This bit's kind of the interesting bit, because there's some deserts in there where you can't grow any wine, but also the Chinese are starting to try and make a lot of their own wines. They are, in theory, one of the biggest wine producing countries in the world. Don't drink Chinese wine yet, they haven't quite mastered it. But also those areas are shifting. India are making a lot of their own wine again, because these sort of countries where historically they've had to import, they're huge markets, so local businessmen, entrepreneurs, morons are deciding they'll put their own wines. So Southern Hemisphere, again, you'll be able to see effectively Chile, Argentina, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. They are the wine producing countries. You also have one of the interesting wines on your list is from Brazil. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. Wine is changing, the climate is changing. The good thing about that is, in theory, it's getting warmer in the UK, but you wouldn't have known that recently. So, this is the bit which will hopefully be a little bit less dry, but hopefully it will let you understand a little bit more, so that when I'm not here, when you get a new wine in, when someone asks you a question, you will have an easy reference guide. The bottle of wine that you are holding will help you tell somebody about that wine. So if you, just for point of reference, it's slightly difficult sometimes because sometimes the French, Italian, Spanish will put the back label purely in their own language. So unless you're fluent in a range of European languages, you might struggle. Increasingly, they are aware that the UK is their biggest export market, often, and if not, Australia and the States will be. So there is something in English. So the front label, by and large, if it's not an old world, old school European wine, will tell you a number of things. It will have the name of the wine. That is quite important. Please, whatever you do, and I will go through this when we go through all the wine list, learn to say the names of the wines properly, because it's one of my biggest bugbears that when I go to a restaurant, I go to a bar, and people say stuff wrong, because it just looks fairly terrible. See, I'm doing good. Change both of those words. and it will. It's take time and effort. You've all got jobs in a bar that a lot of people I think would like to work in. A lot of people certainly want to eat and drink in. So take some pride in the fact that you're working somewhere really good. Make the effort. If you make the effort, especially on wine, and the reason why I am in the wine trade and have been for 10 years, when I was working on your side, I made an effort with wine. If you make an effort with wine with the general public and you give people a better experience, you'll get bigger tips. I really liked having bigger tips because it meant I could spend more money on a variety of things. Whatever those things might be, you will have more of it. Learn more about wine, it helps. So, it will tell you the names of wine, it will tell you the country and region of origin, especially in New World, but also in a bottle of wine from the New Old World like that, now it will tell you the region. So, at the bottom of that bottle, it says Bierzo. Bierzo is a region in Spain. That is the first thing that you need to remember. Your house red is from Bierzo. No one else's house red in the whole of Yorkshire is from Bierzo. It's really interesting, it's really different. It means you have to learn a word that you've probably never heard before, sorry. It will also give you the quality status. So the quality status can be a variety of things in a variety of countries. It's quite difficult. In Spain, they will have things like Reserva and Gran Reserva, different categories of wine that mean different things. They're not necessarily telling you about the quality, but they're telling you the way the wine was made. So different aging in oak, a variety of different things. In other countries, they will use different words. In other countries, those words mean nothing. So, for example, Chile, a lot of people and a lot of wineries that we work with, because we've asked them to, you can put Reserva on a bottle from Chile, and the average person in the supermarket, in the pub, in the restaurant will go, oh, Reserva, it's better. Doesn't mean anything at all. So that's where the world of wine makes things incredibly complicated for the average person. It will also tell you the vintage, so if somebody wants to know, and you will get some pretentious people like me coming in asking, what year was that wine made? Because vintages change. On the front of the bottle, just go and have a look. I'll just check what vintage we're on. It will tell you what year that wine was made. Lie to them, go, oh, don't lie, but make it up. Say, it's 2011, it was a really good year. They won't know. 99% of the time, they won't know. So as long as you have confidence and you will have tasted all the wines from the vintage you're on, make sure they know it's a good year. They will enjoy it more. And if they think they're going to enjoy it more before they start drinking it, they will enjoy it more when they do drink it. It will tell you the producer and the supplier, so in that case, in big letters across the middle of the bottle, it says Flavium. That is the winery. In this case, the winery is in smaller letters at the bottom right, which is Connoisseur. The tasting notes are on the rear. That's really, really important. If you're struggling, if somebody's asking you, and you can't remember, you don't know, you will all have packs on all of the wines, which will have more detail. But on the back of the wine, it will give you 2 or 3 key things. So just if you're taking a wine to table, just try and familiarise yourself with the fact that it will say blackberries, some French oak. 2 or 3 things, and that would be enough for most people that you have an idea. And you can get those all from the back of the bottle on the way to the table. Really simple. It will also have the ABV on there somewhere. For me, personally, that's something that I never ask, because A, I'll have an idea anyway, because I work in the wine trade, but B, if I want that bottle of wine, I know it will be somewhere about 10 to 15%, and I'm comfortable with that. Increasingly in the UK, people ask. That is for a number of reasons. A lot of people want a wine that's as strong as possible, because if they're going to drink, they want to get really drunk. So people, 11%, I don't want to drink that, I want a 14% wine, I want a full proper wine. News for again. That's rubbish, because you can have proper wines made in a lighter style, you can have wines that are 11-12% that are full bodied. But your customer will be right, so pander to them. And some people these days as well will ask for ABV because either they're driving and they want a lower ABV wine, or they're more health conscious so they want a lower ABV wine. So just at least be able to tell them. It will say on the bottle, so you can always say, "I'll just go and check." That does change by vintage as well. I almost know what the bit is. It is important to know that because For example, if you have a hotter year, you will have more sugar in the grapes. Simple. More heat, more sugar in the grape. You'll get sweeter grapes. So the hotter the summer, the more table grapes that we get in the supermarket will taste better. Also means sugar turns into alcohol. So if you're fermenting those grapes, generally it's more difficult to control the alcohol because when you're fermenting, sugar turns into alcohol. So, a little bit of information on things that affect the flavour of wine. This is really important because you will get people that don't like certain wines, that complain about certain wines, don't understand certain wines. Same with things affect the flavour of wine. For me, I find a lot of this stuff absolutely fascinating. Food affects the flavour of wine. We will do various bits, and when we do, I will come back just to do half an hour on these things. If you have certain foodstuffs that are really, really bad with certain wines, that will be the key thing that will show you it really is true. It's not make-believe. When people like me talk about food and wine matching and give you wheels like that you can go, that goes with that, it does. There is science behind it, it's flavour combinations. So if you have something that is, for example, really hot, so if you have something spicy and you have an acidic wine, the heat from the chili will make the wine more acidic. So you need something that's slightly sweeter to make sure that it's balanced. Those things are scientific fact, that is not me making it up, I promise. Then there are lots and lots of other things that also affect wine. Oils from food, hands, lipstick, balms. Girls are more susceptible to this than men because I very rarely wear lipstick, but if you're wearing lipstick, you'll drink the wine through it, largely. Lipstick has oils on it, it sometimes has scents on it. That will affect the flavour of the wine. Tiredness, mood and illness all affect the flavour of wine. A lot of your palate, your body has lots of things that are linked up. Your brain is the most important tool in your body, despite what a lot of people might think. So if you are tired, if you are moody, if you are ill, your palate changes because there's chemical compounds and there's hormone changes that are going on in your body. I know for me, if I'm knackered and I'm in a foul mood, so every day when I get home at about 7, the first glass of wine will generally, there'll be an initial relief because I've had some alcohol and that makes me happier, but it won't taste that good because my brain's feeling bitter and twisted. The second glass, once I've had enough alcohol to make my body slightly happier, will always taste better. This is science. Again, it's not make-believe. There's so much stuff that's going on within your brain that will change flavours. Temperature of wines will affect. So if you have, and for the easiest example is a sweet rosé. If you have that at room temperature, it will taste, even to people that drink sweet rosé, largely fairly horrible because you will taste just how sweet it is. So it will taste like sugar water. If you have that chilled down to 5 degrees, which is generally at the back of a fridge how most people serve it, a lot of that sweetness is cut back. You'll still get it and you'll still get that sugar, but you won't get nearly so much. So it's drinkable. So the temperature that you serve it will change. The warmer it is, the more you taste the fruit and the sugar. Glassware also has a massive impact. If you want me to, again, this stuff